Good morning and a very good welcome to Apex 2026 and our first debate today, which of course is going to be around the PCB industry. The PCB industry is obviously the foundation of the electronic supply chain. In the United States and Europe, it's going through a lot of challenges. Here to debate these challenges, I have Gene Weiner from Weiner Associates and Mark Goodwin from Ventec Corporation. And joining us remotely from Ireland, we have Manfred Huschka from Huschka Consulting. Okay, welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us this morning.
You're welcome.
All right, so I'm going to kick off with the first one, which is we've had a lot of supply chain shocks throughout the industry. Ever since COVID, there's been one supply chain shock after another. The current one, of course, is the problems with the Iranian conflict and the restrictions in the Straits of Hormuz, etc. What kind of effect is that having on the supply of PCBs and materials for electronics? Who wants to go first with that?
Well, from my viewpoint, it's having a dramatic effect upon everyone in the supply chain here. As everyone knows, chips don't float, and they are being shipped to Asia for packaging and for circuit board mounting. However, the surge in AI server boards and in the power requirement stations, the infrastructure needed, has driven a huge rise in the demand for T-glass and other high quality and high technology substrates, which is made primarily by Nitobo in Japan. And at the same time, we're seeing increases in the price of copper. We're seeing shortages and because of the surge in demand for server boards and all, we're seeing increases in shortages in conventional materials as people shift to the high end. So between the price increases, the shortages, the fact that the President of the United States is okay to build individual power plants for the AI servers or for the data centers, it's just causing a big mess, and what I predict will be a pretty severe shortage of both common materials as well as high-tech materials for the next year to 2 years at minimum. It takes it a year to build a furnace just to make more T-glass, for example. Right. So I think we're in for a pretty tough time for the next year or two.
Okay. Well, you've just reeled off a whole smorgasbord of things there, Gene, which we're going to break down as we go through the debate today. But I mean, one thing that Gene said there, Mark, which I think is very true, is that we're sending PCBs. We're getting PCBs from China, bringing them here, populating them. We're making advanced packages, which we're sending back to Asia to get repurposed. We need to get everything on the one continent, quite frankly.
I think in the US there's a chance of doing that. I mean, there's upstream infrastructure for laminates and pre-pregs glass weaving, even some glass yarn production. And obviously there's still laminators and copper foil here. Yeah. Europe, on the other hand, has got a real problem because whilst it has copper foil, that's largely going to Asia, the foil from the plant in Luxembourg. Yep. And it has no glass for our industry, it has no weaving for our industry, it has one laminator left whose feedstocks, a big portion must be coming from the Far East and Asia. Yeah. I mean, and your question was around the Straits of Hormuz. That's just the latest shock. Yeah. The big one is glass fabric. Yeah.
And I think we're going to come on to that in my next question. But I mean, I think if I can turn to Manfred just for a second. I mean, Manfred, you spend most of your time in China. And as far as this Iranian conflict is concerned, I think the biggest issue for China is around energy and supply, oil and that sort of stuff is going to slow down manufacturing capability.
Well, I'm not too sure whether it really influences much because there's tankers going through the Strait of Hormuz straight into China. And basically, when you read the news, it says that Iranian government allows China-owned or China-flagged tankers through. Right now, they were affected in the first 2 weeks, but seemingly now things started to move. And only this morning, I read a report that the first tanker left Saudi Arabia's west coast bound for China. Right? The bigger issue I see short term is the actual PCB supply coming from China into Europe, because a lot of those PCBs are transported coming by air freight, and they use the big the airports in the Gulf region, right? Whether it's Abu Dhabi or Dubai or Doha. So, and they're basically shut down. And reading reports there of like one of the biggest PCB brokers in Europe, NCAB, they said, well, we don't see rise in PCB prices yet, or not that much. The problem is there's so many PCBs, so many shipments are stuck. So, and nobody knows for how long they're going to be stuck there.
He makes a very good point there, for sure. There's all sorts of issues going to develop as this conflict extends longer. But I want to move on, because we've only got a short amount of time, onto some of the other challenges that are out there. And we mentioned some of the producers of glass weave, the T10 that's coming out of Taiwan. Now, a few weeks ago, the manufacturers in Taiwan made a statement saying they thought there was going to be shortages. That was then followed up by, well, the shortages are only going to be in Taiwan. What are you hearing?
Oh, I've heard several things. Number one, a number of the glass people are switching to, the weavers are switching to the high quality, high tech stuff. There will be shortages of not only of the glass, but also of the resin. If the oil, the precursor, keeps getting hung up in the Straits of Hormuz, you need this to make ethylene oxide, which is the precursor for epoxy and all resins. I hear that right now FR4 is on allocation, where you used to be able to get stuff in a week or two. We're now talking 12 weeks, 14 weeks, and even further. And meanwhile, companies in mainland are saying they're switching to convert to provide FR4 to the companies in Taiwan. So it's kind of a mess, and it's very difficult to see how it's going to turn out. As I said, there's going to be shortages. Price increases have gone up by several companies 4 times already in the past year. One of them up was 30% right now for FR4. Right. I think there's also the prices of copper going up all the time, and shortages of heavy copper for ground plants and so forth. Yeah. So the problem is very complex, and it's not easily quickly resolved.
Now, Mark, you're as a laminate manufacturer, you're at the sharp end of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how are you finding it?
Well, let's start with glass. I mean, the glass problem started in the high-end glass, T-glass, low CTE glass, LK glass, but people are converting furnaces to make yarns for those products. Mm-hmm. The problem is the output for those products is 40% lower than the output of e-glass, so it immediately has an impact on the e-glass supply chain. Right. Particularly lightweights, so 2116, 1080 and thinner. 7628, some problems, but not as severe. Mm-hmm. Then we've got the copper foil situation. Everybody converting to VLP 1 to 5. Heavy copper's coming under pressure. Yep. Everybody thinks it's the LME you've got to watch. You've got to watch energy, you've got to watch conversion costs. You've got to watch the fact that the people get more square meters out of thin copper than they do thick copper. So you want to buy heavy copper, it's not just the price. You need to have the relationship upstream to convince your supplier to provide it. And then you have the oil shock on top. And oil, petrochemical feedstocks impact about 30% of the price of FR4. Right. So you get a 50% increase in the feedstocks. You've got a 10 to 15%, depending on it's pre-preg or laminate, straight through.
Right. Well, I mean, I
may add to that.
Yeah.
the copper clad laminate people are also competing with the battery people for the copper foil.
Correct.
And that's taking a tremendous amount away from the printed circuit industry.
Yeah, that's the point I was about to make. Is it's not just the PCB industry that's making the demands. There's lots of other industries upstream that are making demands on this high quality copper.
Yeah, and actually, if I can pivot back to glass for a minute, there was a very interesting announcement yesterday. KB have announced they're building 11 furnaces.
That's Kingboard in
China. They see 20% compound growth rates until 2035 for LK glass, low CTE glass, all the high-end glass. Foxconn announced a 5-year plan for AI infrastructure build-out. So that tells you this is not short-term. It's got a 5 to 10 year range on it.
But this has only just been built around the AI stuff. This is this is not including all the 5G and 6G that's coming down the pipe or any
industrial or automotive, which is all quite quiet at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, on the copper rolling mills, I mean, which is another flashpoint you mentioned. I mean, Panasonic closed down their mill in Austria, and the one in Luxembourg, of course, was acquired by Chinese/Korean owners.
Well, it wasn't acquired by the Chinese in the end. It's owned by Solas Advanced Materials, which is a rollout from Doosan. It was a company called Dayfu looking to purchase it. The Luxembourg government blocked that. I don't know what the long-term implications of that are, but I don't see them as being good, because Dayfu was probably looking for the capacity because Asian business is strong. Quick way to get capacity by this plant. But now they haven't. So if they increase their capacity, what happens to the 60% output from Luxembourg that's going to Asia with its structurally high energy costs and its shipping costs? You've got to question that. And then it's got to survive on what's left, which is 20% to Europe, and maybe 20% to the United States, but we got Camden Copper coming on in the United States. So, don't know. Interesting times.
It is. I mean, and I think, as you mentioned it before we started, I mean, the US is in a stronger position, I guess, than Europe. I mean, Europe is the one that's really struggling here. Manfred, let's come back to you, and maybe if you can, in a few seconds, just tell us a bit more about your experience, because, of course, you're spent a lot of time in China with your consulting business, but of course you're European as well. So you'll see both sides of that argument.
Well, basically, whatever, caught between a rock and a hard place. No, but just going back to the question about copper foil, if you look at the website of Solus, which basically Mark just mentioned, there's no mention of copper foil for laminates. It's only copper foil for LEDs and copper foil for batteries, right? That more or less tells you some sort of the bigger picture. That means if there's somebody comes along that would buy the facility in Luxembourg, the owner would sell it. It all depends on the Luxembourg government whether they would impose further restrictions, as they did on the planned sale to the Chinese company Dayfu. So, but getting back then to the other question about printed circuit boards and manufacture in Asia, it's what basically Gene and also Mark said about AI server boards. That is seeing an exponential growth, right? And those boards, as we all know, they're not just small boards; they're massive, big in size, and very high layer count boards. So currently, there's only a handful of printed circuit board shops that can manufacture those boards. And if you look at the general economic situation in China, it is not the best. So many printed circuit board shops, they're actually struggling. Yeah, and they're faced with FR4 price increases and all sorts of other price increases, cannot participate in the huge growth of the AI servers, right? Whereas those companies who actually are supplying, like who have long-term contracts with NVIDIA or so, they're full, they're bursting out of their seams.
At what point Mark, does this become a real security issue? And is there a possibility, as Manfred kind of alluded to there, that if push comes to shove, the European government could make it mandatory that they buy back?
European government, 27 countries with 50-something opinions.
Exactly.
No chance, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But a point that Manfred made there, we also see the laminators lining up behind these handful of a huge Asian AI server PCB building companies. Mm-hmm. And there's a real polarization going on. We're seeing end-of-life notices coming from customers, coming from suppliers, either official or unofficial. So some are putting notices out, others are quoting a really high price and a lead time you can't live with. End of life by any other, by any other name.
Right.
And they're prioritizing their high-margin VIP AI server companies, and that's going to cause a downstream problem for the PCB industry in Europe. Yep. and in the USA, because at least a couple of the distributors that work with those guys are lined up behind probably the biggest company that's aligning its product with AI, and they're already they're already quoting lead times 14-16 weeks. Right. So keeping a supply chain running from Asia to Europe, Asian to the US under those constraints is really a very difficult thing. I'm a supply chain guy. I know how hard that is. Yeah.
No, I mean it's a huge challenge, but as you mentioned earlier, both of you, that that in the United States you've got your own copper rolling mill capacities and other systems. Are they going to be strong enough to step up and maintain the supply?
Things are changing in the United States. The Printed Circuit Board Association of America, the PCBAA, is getting more traction. Now we have some senators interested in co-sponsoring bills in the Senate, in addition to a bill in the House. We've worked with a manufacturing group to create a documentary of about roughly 22 minutes, which will be shown next week. Will be introduced to the world at a grand opening in Washington, D.C. in a theater. All members of the PCBA and their guests are invited to attend. Will feature, of course, a large American producer, a small growing company in Michigan, K&S Electronics, with Sean Kincaid, who will be flying there for the opening next week. And we're seeing more hopes there for traction and getting funding. We're seeing some states now backing rapid approval of permits, such as Arizona and the Carolinas. So that should accelerate growth there too. So I'm hopeful that this coming year we'll see a lot of progress in the U.S. on that front.
Right. Okay. So my final question, gentlemen, is Asia dominates the high volume PCB manufacturing, but the next wave of advanced HDI and IC substrates is closely linked to semiconductor packaging. Is this an opportunity for Western manufacturers to leapfrog rather than catch up?
No. Where are they going to buy the equipment? How many laser drills could you buy? It's impossible for them to catch up. However, there will be some interesting niches and packaging niches in the West, in my opinion. But there'll be niches. They won't be the volume. That's my take on it.
Okay. There's a lot of movement in Greater Phoenix, Peoria, Chandler, Arizona, for advanced packaging, where TSMC is going to dedicate Building 5 on their 25 square mile campus there. Other companies, Amcor, are setting up with advanced packaging. So I have hopes for the advanced packaging for infrastructure and for data centers and military in the coming 2 years advancing. It's basically through investment from foreign countries, from Korea, from Taiwan, back in the U.S. Yeah. And of course, Texas Instruments is doing their own thing too, as are a few others.
Yeah, there's a huge amount of investment going into the United States here in that front. We'll give the last word to Manfred on this. How is the advanced packaging field doing in China? I mean, are they stepping up? How do you see it playing out?
Taiwan, right, where those big factories are there. And you also see that some of the Taiwanese factories are building factories.
Can we ask you just
in
to start
Thailand.
again on that answer, because we
Yes.
lost the first part of it. So just
Okay.
take a little minute and start again.
Okay. It's basically, yes, there is China is stepping up in manufacture, but as we all know, currently most of those advanced substrates come out of Taiwan, and Taiwanese companies are also building factories in Thailand. Basically, there's subsidiaries, so where they're placing emphasis. The challenge are some Japanese companies who are like ABF, Ajinomoto, and all. It's very hard to catch up with. Chinese manufacturers are trying their best. Will still take a while, but at the same time, from all what I've experienced, if you look at those massive big factories which are there, and like mega factories who employ 10 to 15,000 workers, although most of the factories, most of the plants are almost fully automated. This is just something, it's very, very hard to visualize if you've never seen one of those factories, right? So, and looking at some of them, also seeing their facilities in Vietnam and Thailand, which are built there, they will also go for those advanced substrates, but at the same time, they will probably manufacture the bulk of everything else, whereas the Chinese factories will do the high end stuff. And if you just also look at, for example, Oos, yeah, Woos are building a massive big factory in the same province, in Jiangsu province, where they have their big factory in China, although they have a few factories. And this is really announcement there in the last couple of weeks where like literally hundreds of millions getting invested over the next few years for advanced substrate processing and technologies where like in Europe and the US we're talking about it, but there they're building boards. Yeah, and those boards are getting built primarily for the companies like Nvidia, Google, and so forth, and in the end also for the Chinese like a Baidu. So it's I'm gonna say we haven't really seen what the Chinese can actually do. It's just I know I'm quite familiar with the Chinese printed circuit board manufacturer since more than 25 years, and I see a lot of printed circuit board shops and have seen them really coming from where Europe and the US were like 40 years ago. And then if I look at the Gene, who's seen even more than I have, yeah, like I'm only in the industry since 1980, and the Chinese have come such a long way, and they're still not there. They're still growing, but that is also has something to do with the Chinese mindset, yeah, because all those engineers they want to grow, they want to thrive, they want to prove to their parents that basically they can do something, because a lot of them say engineers of well, I'm too old for it, but say the middle age 40 45-year old ones, they grew up in poverty, right? And they're basically there as managers of or middle managers of factories, department managers. And the young engineers, like every year there's millions of graduate engineers, so the whole level, the technology level is basically increasing year over year. So it's again, it's my opinion. I said it's been there often enough, long enough, and talking to people the whole time. That's just my experience.
It's interesting to see, how the Chinese are still not really fully caught up in some respects. And I think they're going to have difficulty because you can't get access to some certain equipment like ASML machines and things like that. But just to round off the conversation, Europe's got huge problems. There's more, some hope for the United States. Well, and I want to give a very I want to give a shout out and a plug actually to the fact that at Trafalgar Publications here, we're launching a dedicated global advanced packaging magazine in May at ECTC, so look out for that. But gentlemen, we've run right out of time. We're coming up to 10:30, so I want to thank you, Mark Goodwin from Ventec, very much.
You're welcome.
Gene Weiner from
Thank you
Weiner
for having
Associates, and of course Manfred Huschka from all the way over there in Ireland. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
And thank you to our audience for watching.
Thank you very much.
For micro dispensing, there is one product line that is proven and trusted by manufacturers in semiconductor packaging, electronics assembly, medical device, and electromechanical assembly the world over. DL Technology, superior pumps and needles for the finer things in life.